my sister was living in Buffalo or Rochester, actually West Webster. Uh, that her neighbor had a daughter who was working on a master's degree in sociology, whose teacher offered her a job at the Henry Street settlement for the summer.
Uh-huh.
Okay, and she was going to live there. They were going to provide an apartment for her. But Lynn didn't know anyone in New York City, and would I be kind enough to take her out? Sure. I had just broken up with whoever it was I was dating. I didn't have anyone on my list that was of interest enough to say no to that proposition.
Right.
And so Lynn came down, and I met her, and we dated for the whole summer.
Wow.
And as a result of that, I met the man who had hired her for the Henry Street settlement.
Mm-hmm.
And the Henry Street settlement Urban Family Center, which was the name of that particular project, was a temporary housing facility for people on welfare who had lost their apartment for one reason or another, where they could come and not be in a hotel, but actually have an apartment and get, all of the things they needed, the utensils, the forks and knives, the whole thing, and get social work help to find appropriate full-time residence for them to move to.
Right.
Okay? Now, the children of those parents in the elementary school had no trouble adopting to the elementary school. The high school kids had no trouble. But the junior high school kids had a lot of trouble because they were being teased and taunted by the kids in the junior high school who knew they were from welfare families. So they set up an alternative school, and they needed a math and science teacher, and I was hired to do that. Okay. So every morning I had to sign in at the desk at the Urban Family Center, and the woman behind the desk with a little adorable, absolutely adorable 4-year-old on her lap, who I thought had to be her son because she didn't look older than 16 to me. I said in my mind, she's 18 because she's working.
Right.
It can't be her son. It can't be. It's got to be her brother. And her name happened to be Jane. And I happened to start dating her when I found out it was her son. And I happened to have fallen in love with him before I fell in love with her. That's a true story.
Wow, really?
He's now a retired NYPD detective living in Biloxi, Mississippi.
Oh, wow. What an interesting...
Well, that's an interesting sideline.
Yes.
Do we have time to talk about that for a second?
Well, we have about 4 minutes. It depends on what you want to talk about.
We have about 4 minutes.
Yeah.
When my son retired from the NYPD, he and a friend opened a restaurant on 23rd Street called Cajun in the City, because his friend was actually a Cajun chef from Biloxi. And they got a call from the family of a man named Justin Wilson, who had just passed away. And Justin Wilson, like Colonel Tom Sanders, was a pitchman who pitched his Cajun recipes, okay, and spices. And they wanted to continue the line, and they gave it to my son and his partner.
Really?
Which now is their main business out of Biloxi, Mississippi.
Really?
That's the short of a long story.
Well, that's sort of tied into the India spice theme that we started, right?
There's a connection there.
There's a connection
Thank you for seeing that.
Curry.
So where do you want to go with me?
Well, let's talk for a couple of minutes about your acting career. Why did you want to suddenly do that? What made you do that?
The amazing thing about that is you have to understand that I spent most of my life into my late 20s and early 30s being painfully shy. On a plane, I would bring books and tapes and things and get the headphones so I wouldn't have to engage in a conversation with the people sitting across from me.
Right.
One day I decided that I was going to be determined to have a conversation with the people in the 3 across aisle that I had the window seat. I was going to do it. Okay? Yes. And I managed to get on with the early entry group, and I'm sitting in my window seat waiting for the 2 people coming down, and I see these 2 women talking to one another with their hands. And I looked out the window and up at the sky, and I said, I guess it's not my time yet, is it? Again, another true story from the wife of Bill Rapp.
Amazing. You should be doing a one-man show, Bill.
Yeah. I'm writing something called Stories from My Life that I'm thinking about putting into making a one-man show. You want to be my producer?
Why not? Why not, right?
Okay. When I'm at a point where I'm ready to put it together, we'll sit down and we'll go over it, and you'll help me make it into something that we can make money on.
Why not? Maybe you
I'd
can
love
produce
to do that.
You can produce mine, and I'll produce yours. How's that? We'll both do our stories.
You know where I want to do it? 13th Street Repertory Theater.
Ah, that's a great place. That's a wonderful place.
It's a great space. I love it.
It's been there forever. Isn't that where the Israel Horovitz started his show Line with Diane Keaton? I think that's where that started, at the 13th Street Repertory Theater.
That was the place where I first performed live on stage in a show called Line.
That's what I'm just saying. Line was started there.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And that was on forever. How many years
was
that show? Right?
Do you remember how that show opened?
No.
I will remind you. There's a bare stage, and there's a guy with a knapsack asleep on the stage near the front of the stage, and he gets up and he stretches and he goes to the back of the stage with his back to the audience, and it looks like he's urinating, and he turns around and is peeling a banana.
That's the opening.
That was me.
That was you. That was
my role.
Did you get to meet the playwright Israel Horovitz? Because he lives in the neighborhood.
No, I did not.
Did not.
No.
Yeah, well, that's a great show, and I know that you also have that common love for the show The Fantastics that you never got to play, and neither did I. But you never say never. You never know what can happen, Bill.
Can I tell that story briefly?
Yeah. Yeah, briefly.
I have loved The Fantastics from the first time I saw it, and I must have seen it 30 or 40 times. I took my kids, my nieces, everybody. I went to see it over and over and over again, so much that I know the play by heart.
Yes.
And they were showing it, or they were producing it at the Jerry Orbach Theater, and they had an open call, and I went in, and the guy said, "Are you here to audition?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Which role would you like?" And I said, "It doesn't matter to me. I would take either father role."
Right.
And he looked at me and he said, "You're too old."
Oh.
And he broke my heart because I was so intent on being in that play, but in one of those roles that I said, "Oh," and I turned around and I walked away, and it was only later that I thought to myself, "You're an idiot, Bill. Why didn't you say, okay, I can be the old actor coming out of the trunk?"
Right, exactly.
I could do that. I could have been in the play at the Orbach Theater as the old actor. I knew those lines, too. Or, I knew the lines for The Wall. He doesn't say a thing.
I know.
I could have that. Next time it comes around, I take any part that's open.
There's always hope. But we love you for being such a lovely sharing all of your stories, and we're sad about Jane, but you had 44 wonderful years, and I just really want to thank you for being on Mia's World, and thanks to Jade for being my super engineer. And we're just going to go out of the show with the beautiful film score and soundtrack composer Ennio Morricone, whom I had the pleasure to meet years ago in Italy. He died just July 6th, and he wrote the soundtrack to Cinema Paradiso, amongst many other wonderful soundtracks. So here's the end credits to Cinema Paradiso. Thank you, Bill Rapp, and thank you for having me on.
If you ever need another guest, I'm available with many, many more stories.
I know that. Thank you, Bill.
Okay.
Thank you, Jade.
Thank you for having me.
All right. Bye. Bye-bye. Here's Cinema Paradiso.